got up early to make my way through Toronto traffic to a Conservative event featuring Pierre Poilievre, and he announced his counter-tariff plan. Obviously, there was no Milton Friedman in the air. It was all retaliation and plans to fight back, which is politically necessary, I suppose, when the political establishment in Canada absolutely demands that, and the media is asking you to perform more and more anti-American statements. No matter what Poilievre says, by the way, the Liberals will accuse him of being a crypto traitor, booster of Trump, even though it was Mark Carney that Trump effectively endorsed. And I don't think Poilievre and Trump and his team have even spoken ever, not even once. I think the hope is that once the election is over, these war of words will simmer down. Now, Mark Carney's right-hand man is a New York lobbyist named Ian Bremmer. He runs a lobby group in New York City called the Eurasia Group. And if you recall, that's where Gerald Butts, Trudeau's disgraced right-hand man, fled after his ethics scandal. Remember with Jody Wilson-Raybould, how Gerald Butts tried to force her to do a favor for a friend of Trudeau? Anyways, that's where Gerald Butts landed, in New York City, working for the Eurasia Group. That's where Mark Carney's wife works. That's where Evan Solomon, another Liberal star candidate, works. They're the campaign team from New York City. Anyway, Ian Bremmer, who runs the lobby group, I don't know if he saw this, he gave his opinion the other day that what Mark Carney was saying now about getting tough with Trump was just a show, was just to get through the election, and that Carney will likely collapse on everything as soon as the election is done. It's quite something hearing that from Mark Carney's boss, Ian Bremner, that Carney's just doing the whole nationalistic, patriotic thing as a campaign trick, which is what I've been arguing from the beginning. How can you take patriotism lessons from the party that, violated the charter to throw peaceful protesters in jail, that stripped Johnny MacDonald off the $10 bill, that reworded our anthem, that took the historical pictures out of our passport, that calls us genociders, that says the Canadian flag is a right-wing symbol? How do you take patriotism lessons from Mark Carney with 3 passports, who hasn't lived in Canada in a decade? I've said all along, this whole Team Canada patriotism thing is a fake by the Liberals. Anyways, so I went to the Poilievre speech this morning. I had heard most of it before at his big rally in Ottawa a few weeks ago. Here's an extract from today.
If elected, at the end of this month, we'll launch a Keeping Canadians Working Fund, a targeted temporary loan program for businesses that are directly hit, helping them keep workers on the job. Very similar to the type of program that John Baird initiated when we were in the Harper government during the great global recession. Binding people to their jobs, keeping their paychecks going. While we can get through this trade dispute, will help keep the horizon bright and keep our economy stable. But where do we go from there? The second part of the plan is we have to try to end this trade dispute. On day one, as Prime Minister, I will propose to the President to accelerate renegotiations of CUSMA, bringing in a new deal on trade and security. CUSMA must be renegotiated anyway, next year. Why wait? Why not get it done now? Why not end the uncertainty that is paralyzing both sides of the border and that is also costing us jobs today? We should set a firm date to finalize a new deal. And I will propose that both countries pause tariffs while we hammer out that deal.
Well, I had reached out in advance looking to ask a question of Poilievre because he was in the same city I was, but alas, Rebel News was snubbed. 4 regime journalists had questions, none for Rebel News. I think that's 5 Poilievre events in a row where Rebel News reporters went there. We even flew, as you may have seen, we flew David Menzies out to New Brunswick to go to a Conservative event. Our new reporter, Katrina Panova, went out in Nanaimo, and they were snubbed as well. Now, I'm actually not taking this personally, but I do observe that the Conservative Party of Canada now has the same media approach as the Liberal Party of Canada towards Rebel News. Except that I guess the Conservatives don't shoo us out of the building and into the cold. You might have seen, I attended a Mark Carney event a couple of days ago in Georgetown, Ontario. Police wouldn't let us too close to Carney or in the building, but we were outside talking to people, doing streeters, as they say. And I talked to Alex Van Coverden is his name, a Liberal MP. At the Poilievre event in Toronto today, same sort of thing. They had velvet ropes. We weren't allowed too close to Poilievre. We weren't out in the cold. I'll give him that. I'm grateful for that. But we had the exact same access to Pierre Poilievre that we had with Mark Carney, which is zero. And the purpose of this is not to complain. Many politicians have been afraid of our questions before, including Erin O'Toole and Andrew Scheer, and we survived. But to me, not taking a question from Rebel News has a larger meaning that has nothing to do with our feelings. To me, if you are a conservative politician who is afraid to talk to Rebel News, I think it casts doubts on your conservative courage. Are you worried about what the mean girls in the press gallery will say about you if you are seen talking to us? Are you worried that some left-wing panel on the CBC will say, yuck, they're hanging out with the likes of Ezra Levant or David Menzies? I've said a dozen times that my favorite thing about Pierre Poilievre has been, the thing that makes me trust him the most is that he doesn't care what the media party, the regime media, the media political industrial complex, the mean girls think about him. This is my favorite Pierre Poilievre moment. You know the one I'm talking about.
On the topic, I mean, in terms of your sort of strategy currently, you're obviously taking the populist pathway.
What does that mean?
Well, appealing to people's more emotional levels, I would guess. I mean, certainly you tap very strong ideological language quite frequently.
Like what?
Left wing, this and that, right wing, I mean, it's that type of ideological thing.
I never really talk about left or right.
Anyways, I don't
really believe in that.
Okay. A lot of people would say that you're simply taking a page out of the Donald Trump book.
Like which people would say that?
Well, I'm sure a great many Canadians, but...
Like who?
I don't know who, but...
Well, you're the one who asked the question, so
yeah.
You must know somebody.
Okay, I'm sure there's some out there, but anyways, the point of this question is, I mean, why should Canadians trust you with their vote, given, not just the sort of ideological inclination in terms of taking the page out of Donald Trump's book, but
what are you
also
talking about? What page? What page? Can you give me a page? Give me the page. You keep saying
in terms of turning things quite dramatically in terms of Trudeau and the left wing and all of this. I mean, you make quite a it's quite a play that you make on it. So I'm
not
just
sure.
Wondering.
I don't know what your question is.
Then forget that. Why should Canadians trust you with their vote?
Common sense.
Okay.
Common sense for a change.
I love that because it's funny, but I love it because it lets me know that if Pierre Poilievre isn't afraid to quarrel with a journalist like that in real time, he's certainly not going to be afraid of ignoring that journalist if that journalist demands that Poilievre, reneges on a campaign promise. My point is the power relationship there was Pierre Poilievre does what he wants and that whiner journalist is ignored or corrected. Now, is Pierre Poilievre taking notes from those whiner journalists? I mean, is that why he won't talk to Rebel News? And if so, will he sell out other conservative values if the whiny media demand he do? I hope I'm wrong. What if the Poilievre campaign suddenly has a new approach, though? One that indulges the regime media journalists and avoids independent journalists 5 or 6 times in a row. I'm starting to think it's not random. Again, we are who we are. Look, we were born during Stephen Harper's prime ministership. We survived Andrew Scheer. We survived Erin O'Toole, and we will survive Pierre Poilievre. We're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. We'll be fine. It's just sort of sad to me to think that perhaps the Conservative Party is vanillifying. Anyways, but here is what I would have asked about, which frankly is a better question than anything else that was asked today by the 4 mainstream journalists. Donald Trump has objected to Canada's trade surplus, again, something that Milton Friedman would say is a good thing because it's better to consume than to produce, Milton Friedman would say, and Americans are buying things from Canada that are obviously preferential in some way as compared to another place or being made at home. Of course, that's true for the oil sands, by far the biggest import that America buys from Canada. And Canada's auto sector is really just U.S. companies located right across the border from Detroit. I mean, Ford and GM plants are basically sprawling on both sides of the border. So it doesn't make sense to put tariffs on one part of the auto industry since it's making the same vehicle, literally the same car's parts cross the border several times before it's finished. Trump has confused many Canadians, especially conservatives, by calling Canadians nasty and calling for our annexation. Those are emotionally charged words, and they prick the pride of many people, but they're abstract, aren't they? His one tangible complaint, besides our ban on American dairy and poultry and eggs and banks, is our trade surplus. But I say again, that's just largely from oil, which has to be bought from somewhere until America can close the gap, which will take years. So Trump has confused many Canadians with his complaints when the complaints are abstract and even personal. But I wanted to ask Poilievre about the one tangible, positive, business-like, America First thing that Trump has said that's enormously important, and I think we should focus on more. I don't know if you saw, a couple of weeks ago, Trump mused out loud about restarting the Keystone XL pipeline. Did you see it? Keystone XL is a multi-billion-dollar pipeline project that would take oil from Alberta, pass through Saskatchewan, pick up oil there, and take it all down to the U.S., all the way down to the Gulf, to be refined, to be re-exported, whatever, about 800,000 barrels a day. If you do the math, that works out to about $20 billion a year as at current prices. That's almost $30 billion Canadian. Literally, that one pipeline could add 1% to our entire national GDP. That is how big and important it is. Now, Trump knows it's smart. That oil would displace conflict oil imports from OPEC. It's an economic project just to build the thing, and to maintain it, it would be the largest property taxpayer in many of the counties through which it passes. It would employ a lot of steel workers and welders and the like, and it would bring in oil made from American-owned or American-invested companies in the oil sense. Win, win, win. It's ethical oil versus OPEC conflict oil. That's how America should think and talk. That's the America First way. I just wrote a whole little book about it. I mean, shouldn't be that be the way through the fog of this trade war? Revive the Keystone XL pipeline, boost Alberta oil production, get the two countries talking about something positive and mutually beneficial. Danielle Smith is making friends south of the border. She could certainly help, and put Carney on the back foot. Just this week, Carney said he's going to support Bill C-69, pretty much an anti-oil, anti-pipeline ban that Trudeau passed.
We do not plan to repeal Bill C-69, to answer your question directly. What we have said and made very clear 10 days ago, formally with the First Minister's meeting, is that we will move for projects of national interest to remove duplication in terms of environmental assessments and other approvals, and we will follow, as the federal government, the principle of one project, one approval to move forward from that. So what's essential is to work at this time of crisis to come together as a nation, all levels of government, to focus on those projects that are going to make material differences to our country, to Canadian workers, and to our future.
I don't know if you remember, but Trudeau actually used to say when he was pressed on it that he supported the Keystone XL pipeline. I think he did because he knew the U.S. would kill it, either under Barack Obama or under Joe Biden, and indeed both of them did kill it, by the way. Trump revived it in the interim. But Trudeau said he supported it. That's official Liberal policy, and the Canadian government actually signed off on it once. Would Mark Carney support a revived Keystone XL pipeline too, just like Trudeau did? Remember, the Keystone XL pipeline did pass every single regulatory test. It received every single permission. And I say again, it would add 1% to our GDP. It's so huge. Would Mark Carney support and approve of the Keystone XL pipeline being revived or not? Or would he spite Alberta, snub America, and put his World Economic Forum ideology first? That's what I wanted to ask Poilievre about this morning. But unfortunately, the party preferred questions from the mainstream media. Too bad, because I actually think this is the kind of thing that could get Americans excited and snap them out of their anti-Canada fever.